Welcome to the last day of TechEd and our session, Microsoft IT and the practical guide to getting to the cloud. How's that? So we're going to give you some anecdotal stories, how it actually is possible to get there. We've been doing it for the past 18 months, not 18 years. That was almost a Freudian.
Yeah.
And my name is Jim Adams. I'm with Microsoft IT Institute, as is Tony Bray. Tony?
Hi, I'm Tony Bray. I'm an 18-year veteran of Microsoft, and Jim and I are here. We're going to give you, frankly, a little bit of a snippet of information that we actually deliver to Redmond, to customers. What you're going to see is just an hour-plus portion of a 3-day course that we deliver to customers like you in Redmond around various topics around how we do things at Microsoft. And that's really in response to the persistent questions from you all that come to us and just say, just tell us how you're doing it. And cloud, obviously, is one of those key ones. If you're looking for a sales pitch, I promise you this isn't it. We're going to talk at length about really our journey to the cloud, talk to you pretty candidly about the challenges, the advantages, why we're doing it. But talk to you pretty openly, and this is meant to be very, very interactive, so any questions you got, please just pop up to the mics or raise a hand, and we'll try to address them. But with that, Jim?
Okay. So how many of your organizations are contemplating moving to the cloud? Just about everybody.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Okay. Well, we've got some stories to tell you. So Microsoft is similar to your company in some ways, but in many ways, we're very, very different in that we manufacture, we design, and we sell the very software that you're migrating from. Also the enterprise applications that you're using, we build, we run, etc. So as far as some of the potential similarities between your company and Microsoft, well, there's never enough time to do anything, right? Too much work, too little time, and not enough budget. Well, we're the same. Believe it or not, we're the same.
We are the bottom rung of the budget process at Microsoft. Maybe HR is lower, but
yeah, we had
truly,
to hitchhike here.
Yeah.
Potential difference. How about this? We're a high target of security attacks. You probably heard a lot about these. Yeah. Another similarity, the challenge of consumerization of IT. How many of your companies are challenged by bring your own device and having to support it?
Absolutely. And we face the same challenges. Yes. Yeah. Any device, any place, anywhere, we have to support it.
Microsoft is a self-help or a self-service model. Anybody at Microsoft can open up however many SharePoint sites they want.
How many SharePoint developers do we have?
How many SharePoint developers?
Yeah.
In the IT staff?
No, at Microsoft.
At Microsoft? 180,000.
Exactly. Just happens to be the internal population. Ask everybody at Microsoft if they're a developer, and whether they are or not, they certainly believe they are.
Yep. So you've got your business alignments, what your core business needs. You've got your prioritization. You've got your partners. You've got the companies that you work with. We have the same. And we deploy stuff not just once, not just twice, but believe it or not, during our last SharePoint deployment, we deployed that thing 62 times before release to manufacturing. We do this to work out the bugs before you get the software. And we have to do it iteratively. We have to do it many, many, many times.
We have an interesting concept we refer to as dog fooding internally, and that means that we put ourselves through a significant amount of internal pain, frankly, to help get products ready for ship, whether it's to the rest of the company or to externally to customers like you.
Yeah, at any given time, we could be dog fooding 4 or 5 different products at the same time. So stability in the Microsoft IT space is iffy.
Yes.
Yes. Cost reduction. I'm sure you've heard of that in your IT department. We have the same challenges. We hit upon this one.
Yeah.
We have about 95,000 IT experts. I added another 90,000.
All the internal
yeah, we have a
vendors.
lot of vendors as well that think they're CIOs. Yep. And the cloud imperative. You've probably been challenged with looking at the cloud to reduce costs. we have been challenged to do all this first, get there first, find all the bugs first, before our customers get there. That's what we call our first and best. It's kind of a label that we put on Microsoft IT. We're Microsoft's first and best customer because we do things first, way before there's any documentation for the product, way before there's any support for the product. We help write the book on support. We help write the book on the actual documentation for the software. You probably know about this. You probably accumulated a lot of stuff on your networks, on your SharePoint sites, email, mailboxes, etc. Well, we're a little bit different. We accumulate an insanely large amount of stuff. We've got some slides in the future here that will expound upon that. Yep. So why did we go to the cloud? When we had a perfectly good on-premise system that we didn't have to pay for because we have friends in the family. Well, this first and best initiative, we have to dog food what we sell. And we are selling cloud solutions, so we have to use the cloud as well.
Yep.
Believe it or not, disaster recovery came into it. Because in the cloud, disaster recovery comes out of the box. It's part of the service. Not only is our content in one data center 3 times, it's in 2 other data centers simultaneously. And we could be getting our email from one data center one day, another data center another day, and we don't even know about it. It's totally transparent to us.
What Jim didn't tell you is he spent a career actually building the disaster recovery strategy for Microsoft for all of our current stuff, and when it came to the cloud, suddenly that became a very simplified function.
That's right. It was a multi-year effort to get to where we were, and we just stopped that project in its tracks because we were moving to the cloud, or moving a majority of our content into the cloud, where it was a done deal already. Cost, of course, simplify the environment. In theory, right now it's a little more complex for us because we're in the midst of this migration, and I've got some slides to show you why it's more complex now, but in the end it will be a simpler environment. And the last thing, our CEO, Steve Ballmer, and our CIO, Tony Scott, said, we're all in. We're going to use the cloud. We're going to use it for everything. And that was the imperative, and we gladly go there.
Absolutely.
So, there's 2 sides to the cloud, the public side and the private side. How many companies here are thinking of going to a private cloud? Okay. Wow, crickets. Okay, no, just a few. Okay.
Okay.
And how many are contemplating the public? It's okay. It should be binary. Okay. All right. Good. So, the cloud developed at Microsoft first with the dedicated side. It was sort of a project, a feasibility study. And eventually, we got a lot of customers in our private cloud offering. And these same customers now are saying, okay, now that we're on the dedicated cloud, we like the cloud concept. Can we get something a little less expensive? Can we maybe migrate some of our offerings into a public space where it's a commodity item? It's on a per-user license of, X number of dollars per month or a year, and bingo, we have it. We don't have to worry about it. Well, in 2004, Managed Services was put together. It was a Microsoft Managed Services. It was MMS. And we got a handful of companies to jump into that bandwagon, jump onto that bandwagon, and try out hosted services. So we ran their SharePoint, their messaging, their Exchange mailboxes in a Microsoft data center, but it was an expansion of their network. It was a dedicated set of servers in a dedicated caged environment in a Microsoft data center, managing their communications, their collaboration services. This grew into an entire division called Business Productivity Online Solutions. And it was called Dedicated and Shared. They spun up a shared component, which eventually became a service called Office Live. And that's where a mom-and-pop organization with a credit card could sign on to a public service offering for email, for SharePoint, etc. This eventually became Office 365. And eventually after that, it became enterprise ready. And we were the grand experiment in that. So the question is, does your company want to go to a public cloud offering or a private cloud offering? And there's some advantages one way or the other. On the public side, you have the cost advantage. It's very inexpensive compared to standing up your own infrastructure, your own SharePoint farms, your Exchange farms, etc. It's scalable in that if you have cycles of business, if you have cycles of usage, you can scale up almost seamlessly in a public environment. And when you don't need that compute power anymore, or you don't need the storage space any longer, you can ramp down. And you're constantly working on the newest bits. No longer are we looking at an 18-month product cycle. We're looking at a 3-month product cycle. And it's shorter bursts. And you'll be getting new bits every 3 months, and you'll be able to take advantage of those bits as you go, and you don't have to worry about it. Advantages of the private side, customizations. You can do custom code till the cows come home. How many of you have on-premise solutions with a lot of custom code? Yeah. Some of you, okay. Not that you can't do them in the public cloud. You just have to do them differently in the public cloud. You may have security or regulatory constraints that say you can't go to a public offering. You have to have something locked up on-premise. And you might have a legacy environment. You want to just milk it for all it's worth until maybe its end of life. Then you might consider going to the cloud. Or you might consider something like a hybrid. You can't do all this unless you have parity with what you have on-premise. So the reason for not going to the cloud is not the features aren't there yet. The features are now there in the cloud. There are cloud counterparts for almost everything that's on-premise. So back in the day, and I'm only talking a few years, maybe 5 or 6 years, we had data centers spread out all over the world to support our collaboration environment. And this was very costly. It took a lot to manage. And we decided to collapse all this into just 3 data centers. Data centers in the Seattle area to service our headquarters, Dublin to service Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and Singapore to service Asia Pacific. And we have a cloud presence in North America that services currently the entire world. So we have right now 80,000 mailboxes in the public cloud in Office 365, and those users mostly are in North America, but a good percentage of them, maybe 10% of them, are scattered all over the world, and they're actually homing in via their WAN into the data centers in either San Antonio or Chicago or in the Washington, D.C. area. Tomorrow, in the future, and this is only a few years, we plan to have a global namespace where we can have data centers in each of the regions, and it's all connected, same namespace. We're not there yet, but that's the plan, is to have cloud in all the regions, all over the world, and having a hybrid environment for the things that we want to do on-premise.
And Jim, realistically, none of our end users really know where they're being serviced out of.
Nope.
Yeah.
It's totally transparent to our users. So as far as the benefits for the cloud for us, for Microsoft IT, like I said before, high availability and disaster recovery is built into the service. And for us, it's a lower cost per user. Even though Microsoft gets its software free, we still have to do dog fooding, we still have to stand up hardware, and we overbuild everything at Microsoft because when we get the software in pre-beta, we don't know what the capabilities are of that software. Neither do the engineers. That's what they come to us for, to dog food, to find out all these things. So we have to overbuild our infrastructure. And that's really costly because every 3 years we have to roll that. Social collaboration. Office 365 in the cloud has built-in Yammer. And it's really changed the way we interact with our users, Microsoft IT interacting with its users. When we first rolled out the cloud, we thought the help desk would be inundated with issues. So we prepared the help desk ahead of time. We gave them troubleshooting guides. We took great pains to make sure they were prepared for this onslaught of help desk issues for us going into the cloud. And when we did go into the cloud, that flood of help desk tickets didn't come. We found that users were helping users on the Yammer feed, on Facebook, Twitter. So the deluge didn't come, and here we had this grassroots, homegrown support arm that just grew out of nowhere. Now, that can be a good thing and that can be a bad thing. Good thing is it's there. Users are helping users. You find out who the champions are. But there's also some bad information that's being disseminated. So you have to monitor that feed. So the people that were manning the help desk are now monitoring the feeds and interjecting when maybe some advice is wrong or they maybe need to steer the conversation away from that.
Conversations get off target a bit. That's not, I don't want to minimize that we didn't have issues. We absolutely do. Users clearly have issues, but we've kind of focused on developing a culture of self-help so that calling the help desk it's not a necessity.
Yeah. So another disadvantage to having the social help desk thing is you don't have any metrics any longer, unless you use some third-party solutions like Gestalt to measure the sentiment out on the interweb. Yeah. That's a new concept for us, measuring sentiment. So they scrape all the social feeds for keywords like this doesn't work right or this sucks or whatever. Yeah. And they measure that and they give you this graph of sentiment, how many times bad sentiment occurred, etc. So if you see a spike in bad sentiment, that's an indication that you probably have some issues. And then you can look, at your logs. You can work with the Office 365 dashboard and figure out if there's an issue or not. Another big sea change was SkyDrive Pro, formerly called MySites. SkyDrive Pro, massive usage adoption. People are using it to synchronize with their laptops, with their home machines, and they're now storing all their stuff that they usually stored in their My Documents and cussed at when they could not access their My Documents on their workstation at work because they were at home. SkyDrive Pro allows you to seamlessly synchronize between a SkyDrive Pro directory on your local machine and the one in the cloud. People optimization. Focus on the future and not today. So, from an IT perspective, we're no longer maintaining a whole bunch of servers, 177 servers, patching them, making sure the operating systems are all in parity, etc. We don't have to do that anymore. So we've taken our engineers, our help desk people, our program managers, our developers, and we've raised them up a few rungs in the ladder. So we've raised them up to the application level. Now they're worrying about making the services better, dreaming up new solutions that we can put on top of SharePoint, on top of Exchange, etc. Now we can support bring your own device from your phone, from your tablet, from just about anywhere, any place. And, like I said before, there's less infrastructure to maintain. We don't have to worry about a majority of the servers that we used to have.
Yeah, let me grab it. So Jim mentioned briefly about hybrid, and for us, it is a pragmatic approach. We recognize that if you looked across our entire suite of business applications, there's some core percentage of them, say about 50%, that we know we're going to move into the public cloud, absolutely. There's a percentage of them, too, that we will move into a private cloud space, and that's really driven at this point by availability of technology, security, and we'll talk in a little bit about security classifications that we use internally. But for example, our high business impact applications, our data that's HBI, up until very recently, that was really an area that was not available to us to move into the public cloud space. So we've taken very much a hybrid approach. We also recognize there's some percentage of our applications, our business, that are on-premise today. They will stay on-premise until we retire them. They function, they work, there's they meet the needs of the business today. The business will eventually outgrow those applications, but there's not a super compelling reason to want to move them off today and invest our precious resources in doing that. So we've very much taken a hybrid approach right now to get the advantages of cloud, get some cost savings immediately, and begin migrating what we can. And we'll talk in a little bit, too, about some proof of concepts we've done, frankly, to show that things can be done. We've taken some very high-profile, mission-critical applications and moved them into a cloud space as some of our first forays into cloud, just frankly to show that it can be done. But even in some of those applications, the architecture of them, a portion of it may reside on-premise. For example, maybe the database is on-premise, while the user side of it is absolutely out in the cloud. So we've taken very, very much a hybrid approach here right now. But make no bones about it, our ultimate goal is to get as much, if not everything, into a public cloud space, because frankly, that's just where the cost savings are for us. A quick look at security. If I look at this slide real quickly, I'm sorry, my mic's going in and out. This is the slide you would get when you first stand up a SharePoint site, and you'll see very quickly on it, if I can highlight that, you'll see the security designator right there at the top of it. And that security designator is based on some criteria that when you stand up a SharePoint site at Microsoft, and Jim mentioned everybody at Microsoft can stand up a SharePoint site, and I think we have, what, 220,000, 240,000?
240,000.
Yeah, SharePoint sites
Top-level
internally.
sites.
But everything is really data-driven. And security of data, maintaining the integrity of our data is really what drives much of our applications and our decisions about whether something's going into a public cloud space or a private cloud space, or frankly, whether it's going to remain on-premise. But we classify our data according to HBI, MBI, and LBI. LBI, an example of that would frankly just be any kind of project data. MBI data might be something, an example that might be something a little more sensitive, maybe some product release data or something. HBI might be some customer data, for example, would be HBI. Up until very recently, we were very focused on just LBI and MBI things in the public cloud space. HBI was, frankly, if someone came to us and said, my application is entirely HBI, that was a no-go. That was an instant, nope, can't move you there yet. That's changing. Literally, as we speak, we're making our first forays of moving things into a cloud space this week, I believe, that's HBI. And frankly, that's part of it is improving the technologies, improving our own internal processes, improving the security, and sitting down with the businesses and assessing the risk and making some decisions that, yes, indeed, this can be done. Because inherently, everyone recognizes that moving into the cloud, at least for us, is the right thing to do. The savings, the benefits are just too compelling to not go there. And we do have a significant amount of HBI data, so we needed to be able to put the processes, the security, the procedures in place to make that happen. And so we're taking our first forays into that literally this week. And we'll proceed cautiously, but we want to demonstrate it can be done because, again, as part of what we do in IT at Microsoft is to demonstrate concept, to be innovative, and to prove that something indeed can be done and work. So cloud savings. There's a key word up here on this slide that I really want to highlight, and it's about potential. I promise you this wasn't going to be a sales pitch. I'm sure that every one of you have probably had, who've talked about cloud, have had sales guys who've come and told you about all the money you're going to save moving to the cloud. Absolutely. And I don't want to discount that. There clearly are savings. But for us, the potential savings, and I'm going to emphasize potential here because every bit of savings that we have reaped thus far in moving to a cloud, we've taken literally every dime of that and plowed it back, reinvested back into the business to move more things into the cloud. So if you went and looked at Microsoft's bottom line today and said, geez, show us how much you've added to the bottom line by moving to the cloud, you're going to see a big difference today because we've taken every bit of that savings and plowed it back into moving more applications into the cloud. But we have identified really that there's three core areas where we do reap savings today. Part of it's in application development and maintenance. I like to think of it as we can fail faster. We can do development much, much faster today. When I think about my testers, for example, they're not off worrying about whether or not the test environment matches the production environment because they're just doing it in the cloud and they know it is. So they're focused on doing testing and not worrying about hardware configurations. Another area for us is hardware hosting and licenses. This is an area where we've frankly been able to reduce a lot of spend. And then a third area, of course, is in support. A lot of things that classically we would have been focused on doing Patch Tuesdays, for example, just are not headaches for us anymore by moving into the cloud. So again, these are the potential cost savings, and they clearly are savings if I looked at how our budget's broken down today. And if you add it all up, it adds up to about 30%. But again, much as our CFO would like to be able to come to us and say, geez, that's great, you've saved 30%, I'm going to slash your budget by 30% this year because obviously you don't need it. We've had to stand up and say, wait a minute, we're taking that money and shifting it into moving more of our business applications into the cloud, because we talked about this hybrid approach, but it's a multi-year journey for us, absolutely. Whereas Steve B stood up a couple years ago and said, we're all in, that's great, and laid out a vision of where we want to be, but we stood and said, this is fantastic, Steve, and there are 1,400 business applications that have to move, and we have to run a business on top of them, so this will be a multi-year journey. So much of that savings we talk about there, we have taken and replowed back into those efforts to move more and more of those applications into the cloud space.
So the picture that we wanted to show our CIO and all of the executive team was we've got, for our collaboration space, 177 some odd servers, and we want to move to the cloud, and that will allow us to eliminate from our data centers all but about 50 of those servers, because we have to maintain a hybrid environment. We have to have on-premise solutions to dog food and to help develop with the product group. So this is the ideal picture that we wanted to paint. However, to get to this point, we had several steps. Okay, so here's, in essence, the services that we had. And we had to connect to the cloud services. And in order to do so, we had to add a bunch of complexity in order for us to bridge the gap through Azure. So we took applications and we had to convert them into Azure so that we could then host those portals in the cloud and still talk to our business intelligence systems, our back-end systems. Now, once we get those systems into the cloud, we're going to be able to take away those servers that helped us get there. And if we maintain a hybrid environment, this is where we're going to probably stay more or less for a while. However, you don't have the same limitations or demands as Microsoft. What you will be able to do eventually is get rid of everything that is on-premise, save maybe one or two servers and services, and utilize Azure and the cloud for your infrastructure and for your SharePoint services, your Exchange services, etc.
Yeah, please recognize that our goal is ultimately to get rid of everything that's on-premise, but we recognize that we have a number of customers who are going to stay with an on-premise environment. We readily accept that, and we have to be able to support that and test for that and support it, so we will maintain some on-premise capability as a result.
So the question usually is, why is that? Why going to the cloud is going to save so much money? A server is a server is a server, right? Even if it's virtualized on-premise, it's virtualized up there. So why is it so cost-effective?
Part of it is because of the data center technology. Has anybody ever gone out to the R&D data center we have in Redmond? Anybody had a chance to do that? Yeah, if you have, out at Redmond Ridge. Been there? Yeah, pretty neat place. Part of what we do, Jim pointed out our data centers to you, and to be clear, I'm very proud of the data center technology and what's been evolving for us and everything, but many of our competitors would stand up and tell you they're doing very similar concepts. So what I'm presenting here to you isn't something that's unique to Microsoft. But data center technology continues to evolve. For anybody who hasn't been in a data center in a few years, when you walk into a very modern data center, you don't see things like the giant Liebert units. For example, our R&D data center out in Redmond, there are no air handlers, there's no chillers or chiller plant or anything in there, because we take advantage of a couple of key advances in data center technology and really hardware technology. If you think back to the days of just 10 years ago, if you walked into a server room and the temperature got above 72 degrees, there are alarms going off. And really those days are well past us, because hardware manufacturers build chipsets now that operate very comfortably at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And we take advantage of that kind of technology in many of our data centers. But also, when you think about modular design, if you walked out to one of our data centers in Virginia or at Quincy or in Chicago, what you'll see in many cases is just big open space, walk into the room, and it'll be something much larger than this, but a giant open space where you're not seeing racks and racks of servers. What you're seeing is open space where you're drop shipping in pre-assembled components, packs, if you will, Generation 4 or soon Generation 5 packs that just come pre-assembled from the manufacturer, where literally you put them on the back of a semi or drop ship them on an aircraft or an airplane and just drop ship them in and plug them into the system. And really the advantage of being able to do that is really just-in-time need. Instead of having racks and racks of servers sitting there waiting to be utilized, you pre-order these, they become pre-configured from the manufacturer, you ship them in, you drop ship them. In fact, you can go out to Dell or HP's websites, and they've got part numbers for these, and you can pre-order them and have them pre-configured and drop shipped to your location in a matter of weeks. But it's this kinds of advances in technology that makes it much more cost-effective in the public cloud space, and that's what we're trying to take advantage of.
So, get a little more detailed here in what we have. We're going to take a slice of SharePoint here and describe our SharePoint on-premise ecosystem. So like I said before, we have 3 data centers, Seattle, Dublin, and Singapore. The amount of content between those data centers is roughly divided this way. A majority of it, 61% of it, is in North and South America, 24% in EMEA, and 14% in Asia. And we have quite a number of sites, and we have a lot of subsites, but it totals 36 terabytes or thereabout of content. And that's just the SharePoint. That's just our SharePoint. We have 40 farms. And this is what we are moving into the cloud. So how big is 36 terabytes of content? Does anybody know? 36 terabytes in real terms. Any takers? There's some swag here.
Okay.
No hands? Okay.
All right. Fair enough.
All right. So that's 1.9 billion Word documents. Almost 8,000 DVDs. Now, a T3 line is what? 45 megabits per second. So in order to transfer 36 terabytes continuously over a T3 line to get it from point A to point B, and we're talking migration here, it would take us 78 days with no hiccups to get that amount of content from our on-premise into the cloud. And that is best case scenario, okay?
It's unrealistic best case scenario.
Well, it's the best case scenario regardless.
Okay.
Now, we, even Microsoft, we don't have a back door into the cloud. We have to go through the front door just like every other customer. And we have to use migration tools just like every other customer. We can't just take databases and go to our data center and say, okay, attach these databases and we can upgrade here and get into the cloud. Nope, that doesn't work. Totally different architecture. In fact, Microsoft IT doesn't even have visibility to the logs in the back. Microsoft IT has visibility to the same dashboard you do. So, the tools that we have, and we partnered with several companies, and we did benchmarks, and the best we could do was transfer 1 gigabyte an hour. Do you know how long 1 gigabyte an hour throughput will take for 36 terabytes? We will be transferring continuously for 4 years. So, we decided to rethink our strategy. We've got 36 terabytes. How much of it is actually being used? So, we are going to sunset our on-premise solution. We're going to prioritize the most valued assets in our SharePoint farm, and we're going to transfer just the assets that the user base for those properties, for those SharePoint sites, want moved into the cloud. Otherwise, users are free to up and migrate themselves into the cloud. If you want a new SharePoint site at Microsoft, guess what? You're going to get it in the cloud, not on-premise. we do have an exception process if they absolutely have to have, for business reasons, a SharePoint site on premises. But we intend to slowly whittle down our on-premise offering to about 10% of what we have and then maintain at that point. And that is the strategy to get this much content into the cloud. So that's something that you'll have to grapple with. If you have a lot of content, if you are a culture of pack rats like we are, you're going to have to make sure that you prioritize this with your user base.
Okay. You see our current state. I talked to you about some of the potential savings for us, and I emphasize the word potential because thus far we've taken all the savings we've reaped and frankly shifted them into moving more applications, more business applications into the cloud. But ultimately, in the coming year, about 60% is where we'll be. And within 2 years, 90% is our target. We'll be retired. We will have retired the unneeded farms hopefully by then. That's certainly our target. That's our goal. And this may change. If I was a betting person, I'd say it's going to get more aggressive because the compelling value proposition for the public cloud and our ability now to go and put HBI data there, it's just too compelling for the business units, and they want to get there because overall they recognize that there is just too dramatic a cost savings and efficiency, and frankly giving them power to develop faster and release products faster and to have more release cycles. So it's a compelling business proposition. So this is the targets we've laid out right now, but frankly, if anything, I think we'll get more aggressive about it.
So, advantages of hybrid for us. Migration flexibility, we can go from on-premise to the cloud and back again if we want, based on need, based on business need, based on demand, etc. Flexible growth, if we need more space, we can get it fairly quickly. We don't have to requisition new hardware, get it into the data center, provisioned, connected, configured, added to the farm, etc. It's rather seamless. When we get to a certain threshold, they add more stuff. We don't have to worry about that. And we're charged accordingly. And the cost savings. Not having to pay $534 a month per server adds up to quite a bit.
Is there a chargeback that happens from the Office 365 environment back to Microsoft?
We pay for it. Yes, there is a chargeback, and it's standard user license. Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah,
Absolutely. Go ahead. So, here's some real data for you. This is from a tool that we call EKG, for obvious reasons. And this measures, as an average, the time to last byte for our SharePoint environment on-premise and our SharePoint environment in Office 365. And the scale to the far right is the number of seconds. And we're talking about the middle of the scale is somewhere around 1.5 seconds. And this is time to last byte of a typical SharePoint page. And you can see that the bottom graph, the bottom large graph, I should say, labeled SharePoint, we're looking at about a 1/4 second average. And this is averaged across the world. We have sites all over the world that are giving us this data, and we graph it out. And yes, there are spikes because there are network latencies that are transient. But you can see the comparison between on-premise, where we enjoy extremely good network connectivity, and Office 365, where we have to go into the internet. And you can see
clearly, though, let's not make any bones about this. The North America support experience, response experience, is probably better than the person sitting in South Africa.
Absolutely. But the person sitting in South Africa, even on the CorpNet, is going to experience quite a bit of latency. So, one, they're used to it. That doesn't mean that it's good. But the key point here is going to Office 365 for us did not add a significant amount of latency. It did add some latency, yes.
Onboard a new global customer, how do you choose where in the world
When we onboard a new global customer, Microsoft,
internally?
You take someone who signs on to Office 365, for example, they've got presence around the world.
right?
How do you choose which your data centers they should exist in, or can they exist in multiple data centers?
Okay, currently for IT, if we onboard somebody, say, from the Czech Republic, we would create a mailbox in North America. We don't have a choice right now. In the near future, and you can interpret near however you want, in the near future, we will have presence in Europe, and more than likely it's going to be Dublin or Amsterdam. And in Asia, it's more than likely going to be Singapore or maybe Hong Kong or Beijing. And just depending on their proximity, we'll host them in one of those other data centers if they're not in North and South America, in essence. Yeah. Right now we have a constraint. We don't have a global namespace, and we're homing everybody into North America. And
That's internally within Microsoft.
That's internally within Microsoft. If you have a non-global company, let's say your company is based or operates in Europe, you'll go to the Dublin data center, et cetera. You want to give them swag?
Sure.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Sure. So the question was, when we moved into the cloud, did we have some restrictions, such as from Germany, having the data itself in Germany? Yes. And that's one of those reasons why we have a hybrid environment. We have our Dublin data center, which is a part of the European Common Union, and that satisfies that requirement to have their mailboxes. Yes. And when we solve that problem, we'll be able to do that for them as well. Yep.
Yeah. But this performance data point was actually a very critical one when we sat, and believe it or not, even within Microsoft, we had a significant challenge of getting everyone on board with moving to the cloud. It was one thing for Steve B to stand up and say, we're all in, and for that reality to actually take hold at all levels across the company, whether you were an end user or a developer or a person in IT. Everyone had their own concerns about going to the cloud, and clearly for our internal users, and we do laugh about the fact that everybody thinks they're a developer, but for many of them, very real. I mean, they depend on us to provide a service to them to perform critical business functions, and the performance, the experience was top of mind for everyone, and being able to show this kind of performance data early on to our users, no matter where they were around the world, was pretty critical in getting everybody's buy-in of, yes, we get why we're going there. Please.
Kind of layer of performance monitoring to be able to kind of say to your customer, the current customer, that hey, you're getting the same level of performance from this network as you get it from.
That graph that I showed you was part of the answer. Because when we moved into the cloud and we lost access to our logs, the service became rather opaque. And we had to rely on a dashboard that has a green check mark or a red dash to determine what our performance was.
Yeah.
So that EKG tool was a response to that. Trust but verify, you know?
Yeah. And much like you probably have in your own companies, we have SLAs with our own internal users. We have to meet them. I don't think anybody's ever asked us to write a check yet, but it's a painful experience to have to stand up and explain to someone why you didn't hit their SLA that month. But it was having data like this to be able to show, yes, indeed, we are providing.
Yeah, I guess where I'm coming from is
Yeah.
the fact that in an on-prem environment, you're going to have to monitor application uptime.
Yep.
Don't think that you're going to get away from that.
That is correct.
Absolutely.
And that is one of the reasons why I muscled myself into the next version, the Office 16 administration toolkit team in the Microsoft Office division, to let them know what is missing in the current tool set, current dashboard, and work with them to determine what they are going to include in the next version of Office and Office 365 as far as a dashboard and metrics and things like that. We made quite a bit of progress. How much progress will be determined by what they release.
Some of the tools we built internally, frankly, to do monitoring, because you're absolutely right, it doesn't go away, the need to do it, because I still have to provide service to my customers. We build the tools out of necessity, and in turn, frankly, have a great relationship with the product teams, and they say, yeah, that's pretty good, and maybe that ought to be a feature in the next product.
So, yes, one more question.
You said that you have everything in North America like that,
Yep.
but can you use the same services that have been marketed this week, two in North America, two in Europe, and as soon as you be two in mainland China? Aren't they the same data centers that you can use for your services? And why are you only doing it in North America?
You want to take this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. It's a matter of namespace.
Yeah.
We want to have a collapsed namespace where it doesn't matter where you are, you use the same login credentials to access that, and no matter where you are, you would access your content from, let's say you are a North America user and your stuff is primarily in North America, okay? And you go to the European office, you want to access your stuff, we don't want our users to have to home in to North America to get their stuff. We want it to be replicated in the European data center. So we want to have a single presence, and where you log in or what data center should be irrelevant. So you don't have this long haul back to your home base. I see.
You look puzzled.
If Microsoft can't do that, how can a smaller customer expect to be able to do something like that?
These are features that are evolving and are being introduced into the product gradually. They weren't there yet when we made this migration. It could be in the next release in 3 months. We're waiting for that. So, this is a strange graphic to have in this talk, but when you roll out to the cloud, like we did, you have to consider your egress to the internet. You used to have Exchange on-premise, you used to have SharePoint on-premise, you moved to the cloud, now everything is going through your firewall. Everything is going through your threat management gateway or your proxy server or whatever. You need to make sure that that is up to the task of this increased amount of traffic. We were not ready for that. We had 15-year-old technology on our gateways, on our firewall. Yeah. And when we started moving our mailboxes into the cloud, we broke our internet egress for a short while. What we had to do is we had to take a project that was due for the next fiscal year, bring it up a fiscal year, and start replacing our threat management gateway, our proxy servers, with Fortinet hardware routers in order to accommodate the increased amount of traffic out to the internet and back from the internet. So this is something that you have to really consider. Talk with your infrastructure people in your planning phases so that you don't run into the same issues that we did, where we actually broke our internet from internally. So, migration considerations. These are the things that you need to really think about before you migrate into the cloud. If you have a lot of customizations in your SharePoint farm, you'll want to pre-scrub them. You'll want to do some development work ahead of time. Prioritize. Take a look at your most expensive assets, your most used assets, and work on those right up front. Now, Tony has a different viewpoint here. He says do the easy stuff first.
Yeah, I do. I said, you know, the recommendation we should be giving to most people is do the easy things first. Get used to moving to the cloud and do the easy things first. I readily acknowledge that internally, I mentioned, we took some of our most business-critical applications, some of the most complex architecture, and actually moved them first. First to learn ourselves, but also to demonstrate it could be done. We also had a really, really great partnership with that particular business unit who was willing to tolerate a little bit of pain. But the general recommendation that I give to customers who come to us and say, you know, we're thinking about moving to the cloud, and where do we start? And I say, pick a simple business application that you have a simple SharePoint app, something out of the box without a lot of customization that isn't mission critical. Do that first.
We jumped in the pool head first.
Yeah.
With our most complex property.
Absolutely.
But we had to prove that it could be done.
It had to prove it could be done. That was part of winning over the hearts and minds internally of our own staff, of our own people, to prove that it could be done. But it's not If you came to one of our 3-day courses, we readily stand up front and say, we're about to tell you a case study of one of our most high-profile business-critical applications, and this is one of the first ones we moved to the cloud, and there's a huge disclaimer that says, do not do this. But we did it to show it could be done.
So take a look at your permission model. If you use a lot of security groups and nested security groups, these are going to give you heartache because they will probably break. You'll want to clean that up, at least take care of some of the hierarchy, get it down to less than 4 in the hierarchy. It'll make your life a lot easier. Be prepared to do some scripting for licensing if you have a lot of users, like tens of thousands of users, because the console is great for onesie-twosies, but you don't want to do 10,000 at a time. That's kind of that kind of ruins your weekend.
Just where PowerShell comes in pretty handy.
PowerShell, yep. And there is an API for managing using PowerShell.
I can't say this enough. If you don't have a PowerShell expert on your staff, train one. It's pretty essential.
There will be some rework if you have something that is either homebrew or a third party that doesn't quite fit. So these are one of the things that you need to consider before your migration as to what you need to fix, et cetera. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yep. Absolutely is.
So on-premise versus online, prioritize what you migrate. Like we said, you could take the most onerous and start there, or you can do the easy ones first to gain some foothold. Social, that comes with part of the package. It really made an impact on our ability and our expectations of the help desk, and the user base is quite a resource to leverage. It's very, very powerful, and there are measurement tools to measure social interaction and sentiment that you might want to look through. You might want to consider an organic migration versus one that is automated and done for your users. If you have a lot of content, that is definitely something that we would recommend. If you have a smaller size farm, it probably won't be an issue. There are third parties out there that do migration to the cloud. Take a look at those solutions. As far as communications goes, to your end users, to your stakeholders, we can't emphasize enough. Before the migration, prepare your users, prepare the help desk, prepare everybody that is involved and has a stake in the migration. And if there are slip-ups, if you have delays, make sure that you communicate those delays and keep your user base happy. One of the reasons we were able to migrate into the cloud was the features in the cloud. People really wanted those 2013 features. They wanted to have those apps that they could install seamlessly onto their home pages. They wanted to have lolcats on their SharePoint sites. Yeah. So we use that as a carrot. We use communication as the key to informing our user base as to the progress of the migration, et cetera. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
They didn't read it at Microsoft either. Yeah. You can have a campaign where in your lunchroom you can have posters saying there's a migration occurring, check your inbox. But, you can lead a horse to water, but,
We do have some of the same challenges, absolutely.
Yep.
Email
Absolutely.
overload or people don't read it, yeah, absolutely. But we did have a very, if you will, a multi-level campaign, some of it top-down driven, some of it we use the social network, we use Yammer extensively to communicate, and that certainly helps. But we also identified champions to help us within each of the business groups to help, and they would communicate, whether it was in their own staff meetings or something, but they would communicate for us as well. Yes, sir.
The
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing we did too, and Jim didn't, we also did something on the other hand. We talked a lot about the carrot. We used a little bit of a stick too, in that people wanted the advantages of 2013. Well, the only way to get it was to go to the cloud because we didn't upgrade any on-premise servers. So when people came screaming to us about, I want 2013 features, we say, great, there it is. And we'll get you there, but not on-premise.
Yep. Okay, lessons learned. Use all the available migration tools and wizards that come with the product. Also, there are third-party migration tools and wizards that you can purchase. They make your life easier. We've tested the ones that are provided by Microsoft. We were unable to use many of the things that are available to you on the open market. We generally dog food what we build, and we try to refrain from endorsing or utilizing within Microsoft IT third-party solutions when we can. Engage your infrastructure teams very early on in the process, and you'll avoid egress issues like we did and networking issues and things like that. Send as and delegation for email. You'll want to migrate families of users. You don't want to have an executive in the cloud with their administrative assistant who they delegate their email to still on premise. Now, I believe they've fixed this, but when we were migrating, that was an issue. So you might want to make sure that delegation has been fixed. Still an issue?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
As a general rule, we've gotten around it by just saying, just move people as groups. Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing more painful than having your vice president call down and his admin, who suddenly was his delegate, no longer can see his calendar. It's painful.
So if you're not as social as some of the users in our enterprise, make sure you support your support department, the help desk. Make sure that they have knowledge bases and the support from your IT organization to handle any issues during the migration. And communicate, communicate, communicate. Sound like a broken record. So as far as preparations go, understand your environment, what you're using, what type of BI you use, etc. Try doing your application development work early on so that you're ready for the migration, so that your most important assets that you do migrate that have the back-end BI solutions have applications ready to go. And do a lot of dry runs in your migration. And treat each dry run as if it were production. Measure performance. Measure when you should be at a certain step. That way, when you're in the actual migration, when you're actually doing the copy of your information, your data into the cloud, you know where you're at. And you know that you're reaching the point of no return. If you're having issues, you might want to roll back before you get to that point. You want to measure what the performance is on premise, and you want to keep measuring what it is in the cloud to make sure that everything's in line. Prioritize your content. There's no back door to get the content into the cloud. You have to go through the front door. Your network is one of those factors. There's throttling. Even though you might have a T3 line out, you're going to be throttled. And you'll get throughput probably similar to what we have of about 1 gig per hour into the online space. Mm-hmm. Well, this deck is public.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not aware of one. There probably is, but I'm just not aware of it, and there's so many variables. Yeah. Yeah. We built the tool, EKG, that just times the time to last byte. And the byte that we're looking for, we know about because we have these test sites that we pull.
Is that published on Coplex?
That particular one is not, but it's pretty simple to even do in Excel with back-end data services. So you just want to, from wherever you have offices, you want to be able to measure the performance so that you can get a bead on issues early on. Yeah.
Yeah, a critical one for us up front was to establish, what were the user requirements up front, and to set a baseline, whether it was SLAs or response time, whatever, but to set a baseline up front.
So don't move what you don't need. Clean house. Have a party, clean house. Do something to get rid of all the stuff, because what you throw out, you don't have to migrate, and migration is not cheap.
And in truth, this is a core part of our strategy. We painted a worst case scenario for you up here to show the volume of data we're moving. But cleaning house is a pretty critical thing. Whether we end up moving it or the business unit ends up moving it, somebody's still got to move that data. It takes time. It's costly. Just get rid of it. You don't need 16 copies of every document.
That's right. Know what the end goal is. Lock down what support looks like, what you expect. We did that, and we didn't get what we expected. It gave us a clear indication as to what we needed to look at as far as our support structure. We put more people on monitoring the social web as opposed to monitoring the queue of help desk tickets. And I'll say it one more time. When you're a tenant in the cloud space, you don't have access to the back-end servers anymore. You forget the logs. You can't see them anymore. You get a dashboard. Hopefully, in the next revisions of Office 365, we'll have a more robust dashboard. But in the meantime, you'll be looking at either a green check mark or a little dash. You can click those and get a little more detail, but usually it's problem has been resolved. Oh, gee, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for that transient. Yeah.
That's right. So, yes?
Those tools to monitor and look into Yammer and see the percentage, are they generally available?
It's a third-party tool. The company that we're using is called Gestalt. Yes.
Yeah, but they're absolutely out there.
Yeah. All right. So, that's correct. So, question is, what about training? How does Microsoft do training of their end users? Well, we do it very poorly. We have...
Give your spiel and then I'm...
Okay. All right. We have getting started guides. We have get smart work guides and things like that. Do people use them? Some of them do, some of them don't. Most people just hunt and pack for the solutions. Microsoft really expects each user to go to the resources that they have available online, because we have Microsoft Press books for free, things like that. We expect our user base to go out and find out how to use these things. Now, that's Microsoft. For our public, by the time you are using the product, many of those training programs, books, and things like that are available. So you're not hampered by the fact that you're rolling out alpha software that has no documentation.
Yeah.
What Microsoft IT has also done in certain instances was evangelize, find people within a group or population of users from one city or another, and do road shows. Actually go and show productivity solutions to champions within that particular office. And they, in turn, will spread the word at their location. And that's been fairly successful. But it's also pretty expensive to go out and do a road show for an internal deployment like this, especially when, in theory, we're going to be seeing new and better versions every 3 months as they roll these things out. So I think the best solution would probably be to keep a bead on the web resources available for the new capabilities and things like that.
No, that was good.
Well,
I was going to mention
it.
No, I know. I was going to mention that we have a culture where, frankly, we expect people to be able to learn without sitting them down in a formal classroom and be able to learn. We like to believe that we hire very smart people, and when we give them an introduction to the technology and give them new capabilities and provide them online tools to learn, and we do things like a lot of IT white papers and academy videos that we expect people to take advantage of that stuff without me having to go and schedule training for them. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you that approach works for everyone. For some companies, it works great for them to put everybody through formal training. We generally choose not to do that. We'd rather invest in making the applications, frankly, pretty simple. Jim mentioned, like for SharePoint, we emphasize out-of-the-box solutions, even internally. If somebody comes and wants to do customizations of SharePoint and add a lot of custom code to something, we make them jump through extremely painful hoops on many levels to do that. We'd rather just do out-of-the-box solutions because, frankly, people can learn it and use it easily that way.
Yep. Yes, sir.
You said customizations do not migrate. Can you better define what customization is?
Server-side code.
Okay.
Customizations that required installation at the server.
Yeah.
If something goes into, say, SharePoint Designer, creates,
Not a problem.
No problem. No.
that's fine. If they change the master page, that's okay. Third-party web parts?
Probably not. Yep.
But start doing things on the server side, yeah, that's another issue.
That's correct.
Just related to that question, if someone does this customization to upgrade on the surface, what's the effect of that customization? What effect on customization?
Would that be customization on-premise or try to do something in the cloud? You probably wouldn't get very far. There's an API that you have to conform to. You have to utilize Azure in the cloud, and you have to use CSOM calls between Azure and the SharePoint services. So that is the model that has replaced the traditional methods of customizations. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
So the question was there any instance where we had to roll back? For Exchange, no, not roll back. We had to cease iterations of migration, and we migrated 1,000 users per evening, and there were times when we had to halt that because of an issue, and we worked with the product group to figure out what the issue was, work toward a solution that could be put into the product, and we got the next update, and then we resumed. So we had it was rather a staccato type of an effort there. For SharePoint, at several opportunities, we had weekend migrations planned. And when we got started, we had a new tool version from our vendor, and we started the migration up, and it started up fine, and then the performance went down because of an issue. We had to stop migration at that point, and then on Monday morning, we had to send out an apology to our user base, our stakeholders, saying, we had issues, we rolled back to the on-premise solution, we're going to reschedule you for this Saturday. So we had our issues.
We've also, I guess, technically rolled back when we've done migrations with early beta code, with recognizing that we expected it may not work. So in that respect, too, I guess formally we rolled back in those cases, too.
Right. Yes, sir.
You should repeat the question.
So the question was there a lot of cleanup required in IDs and user IDs or logins? No, I can't recall any issues that we had that were large enough to take note of, because we do have a fairly robust security system and identification system. We use ADFS to log into the cloud. Like if I wanted to log into my Office 365 Presence or my SkyDrive Pro, I type in jim.adams@microsoft.com. Uh-oh, and as soon as it sees the Microsoft.com, it knows that I am a member of Office 365. I don't even have to type in my password, and it just launches me through ADFS because I've already been authenticated on my machine, and it works. Knock on wood, yes.
Yeah.
All right, so here's our parting shot. This is not how to migrate to the cloud. You do not want to take everything with you. You want to make sure that you do a little bit of cleanup. The cloud is akin to, let's say you're a tour operator and you have a fleet of buses and you go do tours. Going to the cloud is like farming out the tour buses. You still have control over what you're touring, okay? But you're leaving the driving to somebody else. You're leaving the maintenance of the buses, et cetera, to somebody else. And you're not going to have the opportunity to pack your bags this way. So with that, we leave you, and we'll be around for some additional questions right afterwards, okay?